Welcome back to another episode of the Basalon Cycling Show. I'm your host Sherry. We reached 40,000 subscribers. Thank you for your support, and if you want to keep helping the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell button if you are watching on YouTube, and to rate the show if you are listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I really appreciate your support. This month on Basin News, Race Around Rwanda has a new king. Ted King takes the win in the race, and a special shout out to the first woman, Nicole van Battenburg, a friend from the Netherlands, who not only smashed it in the women's category but also raised money for projects in Rwanda. Congratulations, Nicole. And now, Atlas Mountain Race. It was a very tough race, I would say the hardest one I ever done, but I'm happy I managed to reach the finish line. If you want to know what happened, make sure to check the Atlas Mountain Race video on my YouTube channel. Now, the winner, Alex McCormack, took the win in 3 days, 20 hours, 15 minutes faster than the time that Robin Gapelle finished when the Telouet Pass was featured. An incredible performance in such a tough race with very rough terrain and rocky and changing temperatures. You had like freezing temperatures during the night and really hot during the day. It was quite tricky to know what to take for the race, but I was super happy with my setup. I used a drop bar mountain bike and I managed to reach the finish line. But let me know, what bike would you take to a race like this? And do you prefer road or off-road ultras? Let me know in the comments below. Before we jump into the episode, make sure to check the exclusive discounts in the links in the description for great discounts on products like Redshift, Albion, and more. This month is all about FKTs. Here is everything you need to know about fastest known times. We have a special guest, Reese Ruland. She is the founder of Cycling FKT and an ultra runner. Welcome to the show, Reese.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat about this.
Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I'm really excited to find out more about your background and how did you decide to start Cycling FKT website?
Yeah, so how I started this website actually was, my background is ultra running, and back in the day, like when ultra running was just like, weirdos that liked running long distances, before we had like tons of races everywhere, everyone just was like, hey, here's this route and I'll go do it, and someone go beat that time. And so there's a website like fastestknowntime.com, and that hosts all the running FKTs.
Mm-hmm.
And I did an FKT when I was, doing a cycling. I did the White Rim FKT, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like 100-mile loop in Moab. It's like Canyonlands National Park. It's gorgeous, hands down, like one of the most beautiful rides I've ever done. But I set an FKT for that, and I was like, oh, this stinks. There's not like a consolidated place. I mean, there's Strava, but like you have to know, you're like, okay, like I have to know this route and I have to like find the segment. And I was like, oh, I should just create something. So not to highlight me, but so someone can go beat it, basically. Yeah. And so I was just like, well, I'll just make this site. And I just kind of went through like the routes that I knew that were kind of like, the preeminent routes that, people would travel to. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll start there. And kind of see who has the fastest times and kind of upload those. And I just like randomly started this, and it's been super interesting over the years to have people, like, I don't even know how they find the site because I don't do anything to promote it, but people just like write in and submit a route and a time, and I'm like, this is so cool. But it was really fun seeing seeing times get broken back to back. And by the way, my FKT lasted like 1 month, and this woman, Alexis Scarta, who is, a total badass, she lives like not too far from me, like 5 hours, but in Colorado. She absolutely smashed it. And so I was like, yeah, I had it for like a month, and I was like, well, that was quick.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's gaining popularity, especially since the pandemic. Some pros, like you mentioned, I think she made a video about it. And then also some other pros like Lachlan Morton with the Colorado Trail started to do these FKTs.
Yeah.
But there's indeed not much information out there. I think it's something more established in the running world, in trail running, but not really in cycling. For those who are not familiar with FKTs, can you tell us more about what it is and the principle behind it?
Yeah. I guess I probably should have started there. So FKT, it's the fastest known time, and you have to do, the exact route that someone else does to a certain degree. I'll put an asterisk on that, but normally, yeah, you're like, okay, well, here's this route, I'm going to do it. You can choose when you decide to do it. And then normally you just like submit your time somewhere. And so like with running, you submit it to the cycling or to the fastestknowntime.com, and they just kind of keep track of it. But yeah, it's just who rode a particular route the fastest. It's pretty simple, which is
and
great.
are there any rules, like it has to be road, trail, mountain bike, or are there any categories, or how people can do one and submit it to your website, like to ensure like it counts?
Yeah, so to create a route, the only like I guess the route itself, it can't be like, from Reese's house to, something. So it's public roads, public area, so anyone could access it. There's no trespassing, and it just has to be a route that like someone would, I guess, like travel to. It's notable. There's something about it that's like amazing. So it's not just like, oh, here's my, boring local loop that I do every day at lunch. It's not that. There has to be some like special quality to it. And then when you submit it, I always ask, like, was this supported? Was this unsupported? Was this in a team? Was this like a mixed gender team? Was this like women only, non-binary only, men only, so that we can just classify it, so that if someone goes and challenges it, they can be like, hey, that's the time that I'll try to beat. And like FKTs are just, I mean, it's open for everyone, really. So I always, like, someone wrote in and they're like, hey, can you create like a para category for para athletes? And I was like, yeah, obvious. Like, yes, I am not the dictator of the site. It's like very community driven. So if someone is like, hey, I think you're missing this category, I'm like, yeah, why don't we add it? Like, we make the rules. So like, let's do it. But I guess like in terms of like road or gravel, it can be anything. Like, it doesn't matter. And like normally the people denote what kind of bike they rode, or they'll send in pictures. But I always ask, like, do you have any notes that you'd want to share with someone else? Because ideally it's a place where you can get information if you are doing the route and be like, okay, like I can look through these pictures and see what the terrain is like, or I can see what their bike setup was. And that way it can help inform your own, I guess, logistics of the route.
Exactly. And for example, I notice most of the routes on your website are in the US. There's some in Europe, but mostly in the UK. So, for example, can somebody, let's say, as like a known route, for example, Amsterdam to Paris, would that be something that you could do an FKT on?
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting. So if you were to write into me and you're like, hey, I want to do this route, like, here's the description, here's the distance, here's the GPS file. I do have like kind of requirements for submitting it, just so there's consistency, so that, if you do this route, your GPS file is the one that like I would use. So we're using the same thing. But there are some that are so long, like someone wanted to do one like across the US. And that it's logistically very hard for someone to replicate the exact same thing, because like there could be road closures, there could be, whatever, but so there's more leniency there. So as long as you start, in San Francisco and end in New York City, how you get there, just take the fastest route. But something like, the White Rim or the Kokopelli Trail, that's like an established route that you do have to follow pretty exactly.
Yeah, so might be easier to take one of the established routes. For example, let's say here, the parts of the European Divide Trail. Let's say,
yeah,
that is a known one. That's really cool.
But anyone could submit any route. Like you could totally just be like, yeah, I want to ride from Amsterdam to Paris, and maybe other people will do it. I mean, there are people in the US that ride from like LA to, I think it's Vegas, which is a pretty big, it's a big ride. But like a lot of people have done this route, which I'm like, I have no idea why. It sounds terrible, but I get random submissions every year.
Yeah, and how people can track it and make sure to record it? Do you have any recommendation apps or anything you do to ensure you can track it and then submit it in the proper way?
Yeah, normally they'll send me like their Strava link as well, so I can see the route. I can see if they've like what their elapsed time was, and then they send me the actual file, and then I upload that into like one of my like subscription based things. Like I'll have like a Garmin or a Komoot or even like my Hammerhead GPS like route builder, and then I go and just check to see like, hey, is the elapsed time correct? Were there any like weird GPS irregularities? And then if there's like two routes that I need to compare, like if there's like distance differences, I can kind of see what happens. And it's a lot of it's based on like the honor system. Like I would hope that someone's not like cheating for fastest known time. Like the point is to like it's definitely like more of like a internal, I think, at least for me anyway, like I'm not doing this to really get recognized. It's more just like, hey, I want someone to, I'm proud of it. Like someone go beat this time. Like this was a cool route. It's less like I'm going to get fame and notoriety. Like I don't know if that's it. That's someone's end goal. They've probably chosen the wrong sport or the wrong method. But yeah, it's just whatever GPS you have. And if someone can send like two like forms of GPS, whether it's like a Strava and a file, like that's always probably like the best standard.
And you mentioned before that there's some categories like supported, unsupported pairs. What are the difference? What would you say would be count as supported, for example, in comparison with unsupported?
Yeah, the supported versus unsupported, I feel like that's like the one contentious piece, because the running group classifies supported as like slightly different than I do. And so what I call support is like someone can watch you and someone can cheer you on, and I don't consider that like supported effort. That's just, I don't know. The point of doing a lot of these things is like creating memories and creating experiences. So why would I say that like having someone that is excited for you, like that's not support, that's just enhancing the experience. Doing it alone feels like really vapid or void in some way. So I don't consider that supported. What I do consider supported is like, let's say you're doing an attempt and I hand you a water bottle. That's support. Or you're doing something and I like lead you out for a couple of miles and you draft off of me. Like that would be support. But let's say I live on the route and I always have water out for people. That's unsupported because it's accessible to anyone. Anyone could get this. I'm not like planning this with you. So it's like if it's an available service, like a gas station is available to everyone, but let's say like you have to go in and you do the thing, that's unsupported. So unsupported is like no one's helping you out. You're on your own. You've figured out your logistics. Even if you've like gone ahead and stored, like a food cache or something, it's unsupported.
Mm-hmm. And what are your thoughts on camera cruise? I think a lot of the people doing in the last few years fastest known time are sometimes accompanied by a crew, and some people say, "Oh, that's not support, but actually it's like a emotional support." What
Yeah.
would you consider this kind? I mean, they don't give anything to the riders, but they are basically there all the time. So what are your views on this?
Yeah, I mean, I can see it being some people thinking it's supported, but for me, it's not. Like, I classify that as like an unsupported route. If you're not getting any like logistic help from them, you're not getting food, you're not getting technical support. I think it's just like if someone's fine sharing their experience with a camera crew and then with other people, like sure, like go for it. I don't want to say that's a supported route. And like when I did my FKT, we did a video on it, but for the actual, um, I guess the attempt, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want anyone there. Like I felt like that would be ruining my experience where I would have some kind of, I guess like yeah, like I would have someone watching me, and I wanted it to
Yeah.
be like a really an experience that was just mine, and I
Mm-hmm.
want everyone's FKT or whatever experience to be their own. And so like someone watching a video of like me doing my route, I'm like, well, that's mine. Like I wouldn't expect someone's experience to be that. And so
Yeah.
I kind of just only made sure that if there was a camera, it was at the very beginning and at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
But everything that happened in between, that's like between me and the and the like desert, which was
Yeah.
glorious. Like I loved it. It was like a really private experience. But I
Yeah.
do acknowledge that so many people want to like share it. And I think other people that are professional athletes, right, they have a different consideration where they're trying to stay relevant and have like this brand, and um it's like part of their job, I guess, to like
Yeah.
highlight themselves and be, the promoter of themselves. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the too long didn't read is I wouldn't consider that support. Even if it
Yeah.
is maybe emotional support. I'm like, if someone's doing this, doing an FKT for a camera, that feels almost against the ethos of an
Yeah.
FKT.
Yeah, and having done an FKT yourself, what is the appeal of it, let's say, in comparison with a race, let's say? What's the
Yeah.
appeal of doing something like this? What would someone want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends. It's like a personality based thing. Like for me, racing is, I don't know, it's like not that fun. And I don't get a lot of, I don't know if I get any satisfaction out of a result. Even if I win, I'm like, I don't care. It has no bearing on anything. Like I was way more excited about the the training, the planning, and the race itself was like just like the thing that I guess was the goal. And once I'm done, I'm like, okay, well, what's next? And so I think an FKT, and again, this is speaking like very much so from my perspective, but an FKT is like really targeted for people that I think love the planning aspect. It's really fun to just get obsessive about a route and
Mm-hmm.
kind of scheme on it all the time, especially if it's like a remote route or requires like a lot of gear or stops. Like some people have done like, huge routes, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of planning that goes into it. So I think it requires like that kind of personality where you really love logistics. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, at least for me, when I look at like races, especially, I don't know, the gravel scene, or even like, the lifetime stuff, right? It's like the same
Yeah.
races every year, the same competitors every year. And to me, that seems like really boring. Like there's like I would not want to go to Kansas every single summer for 5 years and race the same race against the same
Yeah.
people. Like that to me, I would not want to like look back and be like, that was cool, because race results don't mean anything to me. Like my life isn't defined by it. When I look at an FKT, or even just like outside of being the fastest, but just looking at the routes and the cool experiences you can have, like that's so much more meaningful to me. And I think to others maybe share the same view, where it's like, oh, this was like really special. I saw this incredible landscape, and like my friend helped me out, and like I spent months planning it, and it becomes like this big experience, which I think is like just really rich compared to just like, I don't really like showing up to an event and being like, all right, like done, dusted. And so it's like this, it's definitely for a personality type. And yeah, that's maybe a little more obsessive. And I think a lot of these folks are maybe more intrinsically motivated. I know I am, like which is interesting, right? I think that I will acknowledge there's like a bit of a contradiction where I'm like, I'm intrinsically motivated, but I created a website where I'm highlighting these things, but I think people aren't doing them for notoriety.
Yeah,
I think
more
it's
like a self-challenge, and it's more like a community recognition rather, as you said, that getting famous for doing a FKT.
Yeah. No one's getting famous. Like I ran this thing in September called the Bryce Canyon Traverse. I did like, it's a 30-mile run, and then I did I don't even know, it's like something bike ride right after it. And you complete this loop. And it was so cool because my partner and I did it together. But like,
nice.
And I submitted it, I got the FKT, but like no one knows, no one cares, which I think is great. And like I cared because it was gorgeous and it was fun to do. It was like, I don't know, this is a fun thing. I saw a beautiful place. I'm like, at the end of the day, like no one cares. And the only person that's ever really going to care is the person that's like, I want to do that route and I'm going to beat this person. And I'll be excited. Like, I hope someone will beat it. And I think that that's great. Like, I'm not married to it. I don't own that route. I don't think I'm the fastest. Like, I was the fastest until someone else goes and smokes it. But yeah, I think it's for FKTs. Everyone has a bit of a different motivation. But for me, anyway, and a lot of the people that write in, they're like excited to share a really cool route that they love or that they've been scheming on. And it's cool to just be like, hey, I made this thing, or I did this thing, like someone else go do it. And so I do think, it's like this weird underground community.
Yeah, exactly. And for example, it's really appealing, I think, because some of the races are quite expensive. So if you're not there, you are more there for the experience and you want to do it on your own time. Let's say you have a very demanding job and you cannot make it on the day of the race, let's say Colorado Trail or something. You can still take on the challenge on your own time or wherever you want. Not that's the advantage, I will say.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, like, even though these places are like open to everyone, there sometimes, it's not totally free. Like, when I go and do some of these trips, like there is significant expense, like doing the travel and all of that. But that happens with a race anyway. But the good thing is, like, I'm not paying a $400 entry fee. I'm paying probably $400 in someone watching my dogs while I'm gone. But it's definitely like, even that, like choosing the day is super cool. Like, if you're like, hey, I can't make whatever Crusher and the Tusher, whatever it's called, if I can't make that, but I want to do it every year, or I want to do something every year or whatever, I'm like, you can just plan it. And, side note, if there are women listening to this podcast, you can plan it around your cycle and when you feel best in your cycle. And that is awesome. Yeah. Like I planned
in your
the white
awesome
rim
week.
Yeah, I planned the white rim to happen like when I feel best within my hormone cycle. And I was like, this feels good. Because, like, I don't know, there are times where, you wake up race day and you're like, oh my God, no. I'm going to be uncomfortable today, huh? So men might not think about that, but women, it's
I don't know. Every time I do a race, it's like boom.
Yes. Yeah.
It comes. I was like, why?
Yeah.
Then I feel super
Really?
bad the rest of the race, and I have to go to the toilet every 100K
Yes.
or something like this. So I was like, if I was able to time it like properly when I is the right
Right.
time of the month, I will be so much faster.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
much better where you're like, you've controlled all the things. And I think that's like one more thing that I think is fun to scheme on is you're like,
Hmm.
oh, I can like physically make sure like this is good for me. And if the weather sucks, like, I don't know, I'm past the point of like suffering for suffering's sake. And if I see that the weather's going to be terrible the day that I've planned, it's
Yeah.
like, no, I'm just going to move it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm allowed to move this. So it's kind of
Yeah.
nice. I'm like, I'm not here to suffer through like shitty weather.
Yeah, exactly. And what's the most popular routes you notice or the most exciting ones? What that you say, wow, that's like a crazy or bucket list?
Yeah, I think for a while the white rim was like really a big thing, and I think it still is. I mean, it is iconic. It is gorgeous. I mean, that's why there's Canyonland National Park. That's why you have to go through it. You do have to get a pass, by the way. If anyone is
Yeah.
going to attempt it, you have to get 2 different passes. Um, but I'm sorry if you can hear my dog snoring. Um,
Oh no,
there's
don't worry,
okay,
you
there's
cannot
snoring in the
hear me.
background. Um, yeah, the White Rim is a really big one. The Kokopelli Trail is another one, and that's here in Moab. Moab is just like, I don't know what it is. I mean, I do know what it is. It's like part of
Paradise.
yeah, it's the Colorado Plateau. It is where, there was this mountain building event, this orogeny, and so it's gorgeous. But the Kokopelli it's interesting. If you ride it, you normally start in Moab, end in Fruta, and I guess runners go from Fruta to Moab, which I think is
Hmm.
interesting. That's a big one. Another one is ironically that Vegas or the LA to Vegas. A
Hmm.
lot of people do that. I think everyone does it when there's this event called Outer Bike. I'm not sure. I think it's Inner Bike. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
heard of that. It's like a big cycling expo. Um,
Yeah.
People do that. Trying to think if there are other ones. There's some just like random ones that show up. And of course,
Yeah.
like there's people submit them from all over the world. And Australia they've been submitting a ton because, it's winter in the US, but it's,
Mm.
full on cycling season down there.
Yeah.
And so folks have just, been submitting stuff, which is cool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think one that was quite popular lately was like Lachlan Morton was doing the fastest known time around Australia, and I think that's why
Oh
I
my
got a
God.
lot of questions from the listeners. It's like, "Whoa, just going there and
That
smashing
would
like I
be,
don't know
yeah.
400K a day."
Absolutely not. Yeah, the stuff that people submit, like there's someone who's been corresponding with me and they live in Thailand and they've
Oh
been
wow.
making a really cool route there. And like it's so detailed, like they have photos, they have like day by day what the route is like. And I'm like, this is so
Mm-hmm.
cool. Like this person is really getting into the logistics and the planning. And so if someone else ever wants to do that, or even if they want to just ride in Thailand, like this is an awesome piece of information that someone could use, even if they're not trying to set the FKT.
Yeah.
Someone's building them like a trip itinerary, essentially, which I'm like, that's
Yeah.
so cool. And it's cool for me. Like I would have never known this thing existed. And so it's fun seeing it come in.
Yeah, exactly. And where do you see everything evolving, like the whole cycling FKT project or the whole scene? You see, like growing in the coming years?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, one of the other ones that I should mention is for routes. It's called like the Marin High Five, and that's in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco. And that's like a super popular route. Awful. It looks terribly hard.
Yeah.
But I've gotten a lot of interest. People are like very interested in that. But it
Yeah.
is funny. Like I'll get emails. I'll get like sometimes like a few a month. Then some months I'll get none. Um, but I do see I think people will be more interested in that. Like, I don't know. I used to work in the cycling industry and kind of like peak gravel racing time was
Mm-hmm.
when I worked
Yeah.
in the cycling industry. And I don't know if it's just that I've left working in that area, or if it's also, maybe it's both. It feels like either I'm just like not hearing about it, or I'm hearing more people being dissatisfied with just the scene. Like, it's boring. And I think more people will look to create their own challenges, because I think once your sport, once your hobby, once you're, people that are doing this for a career or their livelihood, I think if it's boring to you, I don't know if athletes are really good at like just muddling through. Like, you get to a point where you're like, okay, like something's got to change. The Lifetime Gravel Series, it's not like you're doing the Tour de France, which is like, iconic. You could do that every year and it's going to be different. But if you're going to like Emporia or Oklahoma or the Midwest every year, it's like, how many times do you want to ride around in a hairdryer in like in the middle of the summer? It's like, I understand that people would be bored and looking for new challenges and looking to see different things, and kind of create their own. There's a lot of ownership and autonomy that comes with it over, just like, I have to do this race to be a part of this thing. And not that I'm trying to like, downplay anyone that's a part of the Lifetime, but I can understand how it would get monotonous. And I do think that will lead to the popularity of like different challenges.
Yeah, I think there's been kind of a switch when was more like underground, like more relaxed events, and just like having fun and still competitive to, as you said, like more professionalizing. Everything is serious. Like, also the cost increases. It's more difficult to get a spot. For example, Unbound now you can impossible to get a spot really. So that might be also like a good way, an alternative. For example, I see that in ultra cycling is still a bit because it's so like so long, so it's still not like mainstream that can be like maybe attract more professionals, because it's a lot of time commitment and there's not really chances for live coverage. But still, like, it's this relaxed vibe, it's competitive, it's organized, but still you have these people that mostly want an adventure. That racing is fun, but it's not everything. It's more like a journey rather than a result.
Totally. And I do think, and this is a trend I've kind of seen, is and I'm not immune to it, right? Like, I'm getting older too, so like what I'm good at changes, what I can do changes. And I think a lot of people, as they like age out of professional sport, if it's their livelihood, they still, if they're not getting results, that their sponsors are wanting, and they're not getting I guess publicity, or they're being relevant anymore, they have to reinvent themselves. And so we're getting to the point probably where there's cyclists who once were winning races who aren't, and I think a lot of them will gravitate towards slightly obscure distances or challenges to stay relevant. And that's a different motivator than, I think, or that is a different motivator than a lot of people that are doing FKTs, that are doing it just for themselves. And I'm sure these people are doing it just for themselves too, but I do think as folks are like, okay, I'm no longer competitive within road cycling, crit race, whatever it is, I don't want to just focus on gravel, but I think they do start looking outward and like, what's something else I could do. And I've seen people, as they kind of like age out of the sport or whatever, some of the challenges they create for themselves, I'm like, that's super obscure and random, like riding across a state. Like, I was like, okay, it's interesting, but I'm like, it just seems like whatever floats someone's boat. I don't want to do that. Good for them.
Exactly. And being an ultra runner and having done some FKTs, can you give us like 10 tips for beginners in FKTs? Like, okay, if somebody was to do it from couch potato to to doing an FKT tomorrow, what things they should consider?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, 10 tips. Okay, so 10 tips to doing an FKT. First is choose a route that excites you. That's number one. Choose a route that's maybe within your abilities, but maybe like a stretch goal where you can be like, okay, I can stew on this. This is going to be I'm going to scheme. I would say do your research. Most of the routes that I find to be really exciting are definitely obscure, or they require like a lot of logistics, and find people, reach out. Even me, like if people reach out and I can help them in some way, or I can somehow find ways to put them in touch with other people, always ask for help. Like I have asked for help even for routes that I'm not doing an FKT on, but like the Kokopelli Trail, I reached out to this woman, Kate Boyle, incredible athlete. And I was like, hey, can you help? Like, where can I find water? And super helpful in that regard. Another thing is get like obsessive with your gear. Figure out, like, stew on it, like have fun. It's like, I'm gonna try these tires, and if the weather's like this, blah blah blah. Yeah, tires, figure it out. And not all FKTs are like super long distance, so you don't have to plan for like 17 hours on the bike. Train, obviously. Figure out your nutrition, your hydration, all of that, super important. Pick a date, that's for sure. And I think, yeah, just like get excited about it. It's not a race, and if it ever becomes like this isn't going to be fun, you don't have to do it. You can just not do it, which I think is great, because no one knew you were doing it, and no one cares if you don't do it, which is great. Let's see, what else? Submit it to FKT. Yeah, submit it to FKT. If you do in fact get the fastest known time. And then gosh, the last one is, have fun. It should be fun regardless. Even after the fact, I think knowing that someone is going to beat your time eventually, it was still fun, and hopefully being the fastest wasn't actually the only goal, but the whole goal was just like having a good time, doing something you're proud of, and then like moving on with your life. And who knows, maybe someone will break your time, and then that's motivation for you to go back and do it again, which I think is
no,
it's an endless cycle. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, wow, that's great. Thank you so much for all your tips and insights, Reese. I will leave all the information about cycling FKTs, a link to your Instagram, and all the info that people need in the links in the description. And looking forward to see how many FKTs there will be in the future.
Yeah, are you going to try one? Will you do an FKT?
Definitely. I'm looking for the route here in Europe. So
oh my God, send it in.
Submitting one.
I love it. That would be awesome. And thank you so much for having me and reaching out. It's super fun to see how people find this, and I just hope, I hope people can, go on cool experiences and make memories in beautiful places, and go fast while they're doing it. So thank you so much. I appreciate you reaching out to me.
Thanks for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe if you are watching on YouTube, and to rate the show if you are listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All the information we talk about is in the description below, and you can also find exclusive discounts for Redshift, Albion, and more. Thanks for your support. Until the next episode.